Welcome everybody, welcome to the webinar. I'm really excited to do this one. It's a kind of different webinar than what I would usually be doing. And my main premise or idea here is to do some post-processing on family event photos. So I'm thinking that these images are probably going to be less staged for the most part and more impromptu events, things that you're hanging out and going and doing things with your family, and sometimes we have technical problems or we just want to improve the image to send it out to other family members or print the image or do whatever we want to do with it. So oftentimes we don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing post-processing on a boatload of images, on a whole bunch of photos. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to introduce you to the Nik Selective tool, which is here available in Photoshop. It's one of the ways that you access the software. I'm going to show you some tricks for working more quickly, a little bit faster, and yield opportunities to still be specific or precise if you need to be. Okay, so here you've got the Nik Selective tool in Photoshop. It's one of the two ways that you would access the Nik collection from Photoshop. I'm actually going to close this tool for a second because I want to show you where to find it if it's not popping up when you open up your Photoshop interface. So we'll close that. The other way to access the Nik plugins from Photoshop is if you go to the filter drop-down menu in Photoshop, and down at the bottom you'll find the Nik Collection suite down there. And so you can access tools through there, but the new Nik Selective tool actually has added capabilities, and I would say you probably want to be able to utilize a lot of these. So let's take a look at them. First off, we've got to go find them. And to do that, you go to the File drop-down menu, you go to Automate, and then to the Nik Selective tool. So again, a lot of folks, when you open up Photoshop, this tool just pops up. It opens up for you. If that's not happening for you, to access the tool, this is how you do it. File, Automate, Nik Selective tool. You just click on it. And then if you're interested in actually having the Nik Selective tool open when you launch Photoshop automatically, there's an option for that in the settings. So if you follow my cursor to the lower left corner of the Nik Selective tool here, there's a little gear. If you click on it, and we're going to revisit this, by the way, because there's a few options I want to show you later on. But basically, when you click on that little settings button, you get your general and you get your filter application preferences. And you can see my Open Nik Selective tool automatically is checked on. Yours may be checked off. If you want the software to launch with the Nik Selective tool, make sure this is checked on. If you decide that you don't want to use it for some reason, just turn it off. You can click it right there. Okay, so once you've clicked that on, you click the OK button to apply that change in your preferences, and you should have your Nik Selective tool, and it's going to either look like this or it's going to be minimized. There's actually a couple ways to minimize the Nik Selective tool. You can do it this way so that you can just see the tool icons, the different pieces of software from the suite, from Define to Viveza to Perspective Effects and so on and so forth. Or if you click on the icon that's in the very top here, I'm sorry if it's hard to see. I actually tried to enlarge my screen so that you could see it a little bit better. But the two little boxes with the lines or dashes next to them, if you click on that, it opens up and you're able to read the different pieces of software. And actually, just as like a pro tip, I tend to store the Nik Selective tool kind of like this off to the side next to my tools palette while I'm doing stuff in Photoshop. And then when I'm ready to use the Nik software, I'll open this up when I'm on my sort of single screen system as we are here. All right, so what the heck is the Nik Selective tool? We've described kind of the fact that this is where you launch your software. There are some really great added capabilities. The first one that's really interesting, and I leave this on and open, is there's always some sort of news coming out from DxO for Nik software. And so this top bit here is the upcoming news. So do you know what you can do with perspective effects? No? Okay, well, you can click on this and it's going to bring you over to recorded webinars. And if there are any new pieces of, any new webinars coming up, you'll actually see that listed here in sort of your little news box or your update. So let's go ahead and just use the Nik Selective tool as one would sort of typically use the software. And that is, we're gonna go and click on Silver Efex Pro right here, and we're just gonna launch the software, just so you see that once. we're going to convert this image that's already in black and white to black and white, right? So it's a scanned, it's actually a scanned print of this little girl. This is actually my mom from 1949, which is kind of fun. It's a scanned piece of paper because we didn't have the negative, and so when it was scanned, you can see the browning of the paper or the yellowing of the paper. And so by bringing in historic images like this into Silver Effects, I'm able to very quickly just go and fix this stuff, add some contrast. We've got all of the capabilities within Silver Effects Pro to do whatever we might need to do on the image. I can see that I need to dodge and burn a little bit, but what I've done here is I've just used the More Silver preset on the left side, simply clicked on it, and it applies our adjustments from Silver Effects onto the image. And actually, I'm going to click the OK button, and we're going to walk through this again, but I want to show you an even faster way of working if there is a particular preset that you want to use over and over again. Okay, so I click the OK button. It brings us back over into Photoshop. You can see the original image with the background layer, and that background layer has been duplicated, and our Silver Effects Pro adjustments have been applied to our layer. Now, I'm going to actually delete this layer here in Photoshop and just show you a different way of doing exactly the same thing that can work much faster. So I'm going to hit the delete key on my keyboard. It'll get rid of that layer for me. If you follow me back over into the Nik Selective tool, you'll note that there's a little drop down next to several of these pieces of software here. And what we're able to do with the little drop down or pop up is we've got a last edit capability, which I'm going to show you that because there's a couple ways of utilizing that tool. And then there are my favorited presets, right? So these are several of my favorite presets that are listed out. And if I go ahead and just click on More Silver, the software, Silver Effects Pro, is going to launch and it's going to apply that preset for us immediately. And this is a great way of utilizing presets very quickly. A lot of times, all I need to do is click on the preset, and then I could simply click the OK button in the lower right corner. But the benefit of being able to open directly into, in this case, the More Silver preset, is that it's applying the adjustment. Now I can go in and maybe just add a little bit more contrast overall. Maybe go into my brightness. I'm just going to darken down the shadows just a touch. And let's say we're happy with these results. Now we click the OK button, and we've very quickly applied our adjustment. That's correcting our image a bunch. There's still work to be done on this image for sure, but if you look at that, we've clicked, 4 times, and we've already neutralized the image and brought out a lot of the textures and tones really nicely. Okay, that's one way of using the Nik Selective tool. So let's go ahead and actually close this image. I don't need to save it. Unfortunately, we're not going to have enough time to go through and process all of these images from start to finish. I want to kind of show you some of these steps. So like this first one, I've kind of pre-baked, if you will. This was a photograph of my niece and her family, my sister and brother-in-law and nephew. And we just did a little photo shoot when she graduated. The school she graduated from didn't send her, or she never got the regalia for graduating. So we had her put on her high school regalia, and then I just changed it to be a closer tone and color to what it should be for the college and the program that she was graduating from. So anyways, long story short, this filter or this adjustment here, I did all of that in Color Effects Pro, right? Which is a collection of 55 individual filters. This is like 3 or 4 filters applying on top of our red regalia, and then I've actually used a mask in Photoshop just to kind of describe what I'm doing. I know that a lot of folks out there can see exactly what I'm doing and have done these kinds of things before, but I imagine there are folks in the presentation who don't use Photoshop all that much, or don't use the Nik Selective tool or the Nik Collection all that much. So I just want to make sure I'm pretty descriptive as to what you're seeing. All right, so we've got our first layer where we're changing those colors to brown. Let's actually jump into Color Effects Pro, and we'll use the Nik Selective tool kind of the same way we used it a minute ago with Silver Effects. That is, when I open up into the color effects, color filters, and creative effects, I can actually access my favorited filters. So these are the individual filters that I've favorited within the software. I'll remember to show you how to do that as well. I forgot to show you how to do that with Silver Effects. And then these are my favorited recipes. So just to be clear, the filters are the individual tools like Pro Contrast or tonal contrast or colorization or low key or whatever, right? Those are the different filters. The recipes, these are groupings of filters that are designed to do a particular thing. So in this image, I actually had created, because I'd shot, we shot for an hour or so, I created a couple presets, one being this portrait glow preset, or sorry, I say preset, it's actually called a recipe. So portrait glow recipe for color effects. And when I click on this, we're not just going to open into Color Effects Pro and have one filter kind of applied to the image or in the interface. We'll actually have a grouping of filters, and you're going to see those show up on the right side. So where it says empty filter, because I clicked on that particular recipe, now I'm using Skylight, cross-processing, dynamic skin softener, low key, and maybe one more, or that might be my last one. So the first thing I'm going to do, my interface keeps opening like this, sort of as a floating screen. If I want my interface to go out to full screen, I of course can go into the toolbar up at the top, slightly different on a Mac compared to a PC, but I can click on the little plus button, and that's going to expand the interface, the color effects interface, so that we get more image real estate. What I actually prefer to do is, you only have to do this once, by the way, until you update your software, but you should be able to just move the entire interface into the upper left corner, then take your cursor into the lower right corner of your Nik software plugin and expand this out. And now the next time I open Color Effects, it should actually open full screen like this. Some folks like to do it like that. I prefer the full screen, so that's why we're going to do that. And it's an opportunity for me to walk you through some of the interface. In fact, to walk you through a little bit more of the interface, right now we're in the recipes section. In the upper left corner, you can see that the recipes are highlighted. One of the things that you will notice in the custom recipes, so these are all recipes that I've created for my own kinds of adjustments and workflows, some of the recipes have a little highlighted star that's to the left, and that is a favorited recipe. And so those are the recipes that show up in your Nik Selective tool. So you can see DT rust removal or rust project. It's not rust removal, it's a photo series. Here's an inverted glow, which is just a fun workflow. Portrait glow, this is the recipe that we clicked on in the Nik Selective tool. So it launches directly into it. Now I've wasted some time trying to explain what this is doing, or I guess I haven't wasted it because hopefully we're learning a little bit, but if I don't need to go to the left side of the interface and click on that recipe, it launches using the Nik Selective tool directly into this series of filters. I can work even faster, right? And in fact, I like this recipe on this image, but one thing is I think the dynamic skin softener is too strong, right? I'm gonna hit Command plus a couple times, so that's gonna zoom us into 50%. If you follow my cursor into the upper left corner, if I press and hold the compare button, you can see the original image. And then if I let go, you can see the enhanced image. I think that the dynamic skin softener is too strong. So we move over into our filter stack on the right side of the interface. I'm just going to click on dynamic skin softener. We're going to click on the words control points. And then we're just going to dial this opacity of the entire filter down. And as I bring this down, I'm just going to watch to see how sort of realistic the skin softening is. And in this case, I think it's a lot better. It's not too strong. When it was on full application, it was too strong, or at 76%. You can actually see that my depth of field is a little bit too short. Another discussion that we might have is using Sharpener Pro to just get a little bit more texture or detail back in this portion of the photo, so that Zach is a little bit sharper in comparison to what he is now. So anyways, long story short, we clicked on the recipe with the Nik Selective tool. We've made our adjustment while we're in the Nik software. Let's say we're all done processing the image. We don't need to make any other changes. You just click that OK button in the lower right corner. That's going to bring us back over into Photoshop. And we've actually covered a lot of what we set out to do. But I have some more sort of impromptu images coming up next, where there's 4 images that are shot in the same environment, and therefore we might do the same filters and adjustments on all of them very quickly. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do that. Anyways, we've used our Nik Selective tool to access our recipe. I'm going to minimize Color Effects Pro for now. We're actually going to use Silver Effects Pro on the next series of images. So let's go ahead and close out this family portrait. And here we've got a couple images. I'm going to minimize my layers. We don't need that open. So we've got a couple images from an event that the family did a couple years ago, where we did a sort of family paint and sip kind of thing, which was a whole lot of fun. None of us can paint except for, well, 3. My sister can paint. My brother and my sister-in-law are both amazing painters. So they're going and doing this beautiful landscape. And, I end up with basically blobs of ink, or not ink, blobs of paint on the canvas. But it was fun. Anyways, let's use the Nik Selective tool a little bit. So in this case, rather than clicking on a preset, we will use a preset, but rather than clicking on it, let's just open up Silver Effects Pro. We'll move into the presets section on the left side, once the software launches. And right now, maybe I don't want to use the En Vogue presets. Right now, we're in the En Vogue, which are these 10 additional presets to the entire Silver Effects software. Really fun, beautiful tools that do different things than the original presets that were built into the software. You can see them all. But just a little bit more about the interface itself. If you go up into the preset library, you can click on the All button, and now I can see all of my presets. And as I scroll through, you can see kind of like a heads-up display of what this image would look like if we click on that particular preset. In fact, if I click on High Structure, you'll notice the image in the preview here is going to change because I've clicked on it. And basically what these presets are doing are adjusting the different sliders and all of the different tools on the right side of the interface. And so all of these tools, global adjustments, selective adjustments, so on and so forth, are available to you to do customized work. And the idea of Silver Effects is supposed to be a professional, super high-end black and white conversion software, which emulates a lot of the things that one might do in the darkroom, the wet darkroom. Now, another way of using these presets, I'm actually using my mouse and kind of clicking on each one, but I can just use an arrow key and I can just see what my image is going to look like. Sometimes these previews are too small to get a really good sense. So sometimes I'll actually just look at it by sort of rummaging through this way. I actually know that I want, this is kind of cool. Sort of looks old school. His skin's going very dark because of his tan and because of the way that the color filter is working. But we're going to go ahead and speed this up just a touch because it doesn't really matter which preset we're using. I do want to use, I think it was the intensifier. I like that, but now the shadows aren't as dark as I'd like them to be. So I've clicked on that preset on the left. We're going to move into the global adjustments, and I'm just going to take the dynamic brightness down and the shadows down just a little bit. And then the highlights up just a touch. The lighting is a little bit funky on this image, but it's a snapshot, so it's kind of okay that it works this way. So let's say we're happy with this result. We love this. We're going to use this for the next 5 images. Let's click the OK button. That's going to bring us back over into Photoshop. We'll have our result. And I want to show you how to use the last edit capability. And even if, like, some of the adjustments here, maybe I want to do a little bit more to that particular photo, but in this case, I like what's happening and I want to be able to do that to a whole bunch of photos. So rather than having to click on Silver Effects or click on a recipe and then make the adjustments that we did with the tools palette on the right side, I can actually just click the last edit button that's here within the Nik Selective tool. And you'll find this last edit button in most of the modules here in the Nik collection. So if I click last edit, right now the way I have it set up, I'm going to click on it, is that it launches Silver Efex Pro. It does whatever the thing was that we did to the last edit, right? The previous image. In this case, it was to click on that preset and then to make some little adjustments to the shadows and the dynamic brightness. If those adjustments don't fit this image, we could make changes to them. But if we really like it, we can just click the OK button. And that's just one way of using the last edit button, because as I click the OK button, if we sort of recall or recant back, I clicked on last edit, it launches, it does the stuff, it makes all of the adjustments that we did, but it opened up into the Nik module, Silver Efex Pro, and it allows us to make changes, right? That's one way of using this last edit button. The other way of using the last edit button is to actually have the same exact adjustment, the last edit, applied to the image, but without actually launching into Silver Efex Pro. So let's look at that one. I'm going to move to the next image from the same series. I'm going to move into our settings. So we're here in the Nik Selective tool. Let's click on settings. And then we did talk about open the Nik Selective tool automatically earlier. So if we want it to pop up, we can, it will. The Nik Selective tool will just pop up when we launch Photoshop. Right now, when we click on apply favorite filters, recipes, and last edit, we have them opening the Nik Collection. But if we click on this drop-down menu and say apply in Photoshop, now when I click on the last edit of Silver Efex, it's not even going to open the software. It's just going to make the adjustments for us and we'll be done. So it's an even faster way of working if you know that you don't need to make any other adjustments to the image, right? So there. And now, like if we were to look through those three images, we have the exact same set of adjustments made. And now we have a series of photos that have the same adjustments. I've got just one more picture. Let's just click last edit one more time. You'll see it happen. And then we'll keep moving on. From there, I want to talk a little bit more about making some corrective adjustments on some different kinds of photographs, because now we can access the software. Let's kind of see what the software can do from the Nik Selective tool and beyond that. I'm going to close out my ruler. There we go. And again, we've just very quickly applied that same exact set of adjustments that we've designed explicitly within Silver Efex. So moving into this image. So more and more, I hear of folks who, and this has been happening for the past probably 25 years or so, or 20 years at least, where folks are wanting to digitize, old family pictures. And there is a number of services that do it for you. You can do it yourself using some kind of scanner or a mount mounted to your camera with a lens that will work for such things. But a lot of times, especially color scanned film, there's degradation, there's scratches, there are color malfunctions or adjustments that you need to make because of dye migration and other issues that occur with old photographs. And this is a pretty common thing. So this is a chrome. It's a 35 millimeter piece of chrome film, and then this would have been shot in the 40s, late 40s, I would think. And it actually held up pretty well, surprisingly, because there's actually some magenta and red still left, in these areas. And I would definitely suggest going into Photoshop and cleaning up all of these spots and so on and so forth. But that, while time-consuming, is relatively straightforward. You can just use your clone stamp to kind of go and clean that stuff up, or there's a number of different techniques for doing that. But fixing the color in these kinds of images can be difficult. So I want to show you, I think, 3 filters on this image that are going to allow us to correct the color, adjust the contrast, and kind of get it back to where I would expect this would have actually, what it would have looked like before the degradation of the film. So we're going to go into Color Efex Pro. We'll actually create a recipe for this as well. So we launch Color Efex. We use the Nik Selective tool to do that. I need to open up my filter stack, or I'm sorry, my filter list. So if you follow my cursor into the upper left corner and we open up into our filter library, again in the upper left corner, I'm going to start out with the Pro Contrast filter, because this is a really very powerful filter that only has 3 sliders, but can correct and fix all sorts of problems. So I've scrolled down in the filter list to Pro Contrast. It's in alphabetical order, so it would be relatively easy to find. I click on Pro Contrast, and then my filter shows up on the right side of the interface. So the first thing that I'm going to attempt to do is correct the color cast that's occurring. So I'm just going to slide this slider up, and immediately the color starts to look better, right? If we click on the compare button, it's not perfect yet. I don't know if we'll be able to get it perfect, but if we click on the compare button, you can see the photo is cyan, right? It's cool. It's much cooler than it should be. And that's because of the way that I would imagine the yellow layer on the chrome film is being degraded, right? But by applying the Pro Contrast filter and just simply taking the correct color cast slider up, it's doing a nice job to correct that. By the way, the easiest way to figure out what color a color cast is, and this only works with some images, but look at something that should be neutral, right? Something that should be white or gray. So I imagine Ed's shirt here should be gray or white. And in the original image, when we're holding the compare button, looking at the original, you can see his shirt's kind of blue. So it's just an easy way to kind of figure out what color your color cast is. You don't have to worry about that with this filter because it kind of just fixes it for us. But the next filter that I'm going to show you, you actually need to know what color the issue is kind of coming from. So the other slider we're going to use here is called dynamic contrast. We're just going to slide this up. If I bring it all the way up to 100, I think it's too contrasty. This doesn't look all that appealing anymore. But I do want to bring this down and just increase the contrast a little bit. And let's just take a look at the compare button one more time. I constantly use the compare button or the split preview, especially when making color adjustments like this, to just see where it is and where it came from, and to see if there's anything else I might need to do to the image. This photo is not without its own major problems, but we're trying to fix the major ones that are going to be easy and actually make the photo look a lot better, have it had some depth, the original depth that the photo had. So we're finished with the Pro Contrast filter. Let's click the Add Filter button. And I'm going to show you the Remove Color Cast filter. So clicking on the Remove Color Cast filter, you see it shows up on the right side. And this is where you have to know what color you want to remove. We've already established that the color we need to remove is a cyan kind of blue color, right? So I'm going to take the color slider and slide it over towards blue. And when I get to the original one, you can see that there's an issue. As I slide this over, you can actually watch those colors start to neutralize. I think it's too strong right now, but right about here, it looks like my colors are more vibrant, my neutrals are more neutral, and so on. So I've set my color. I'm going to just take my strength slider down because I don't want as much of it. Let's actually just look and see what this one filter is doing for us. So I'm going to click the little checkbox off. There's the before, and there's the after of this particular filter. I'm going to slide it a little more towards blue. Yeah, a little more towards blue. There we go. And then we're just going to finish this one off because there's something called tonal inversion that's occurring right now. And that is some of the areas that are in shadow are actually brighter than some of the things that are just a dark tone, right? So this should be almost black with no detail. And you can see that same thing occurring back here and here. I want to fix that because that's another one of these major issues that is making it so the image looks funky and strange. So what we're going to do is click the Add Filter button. And what we need to do is darken it down selectively. So we're going to do that actually using the low key filter, because this does a beautiful job of that. The thing about it is that when we click on low key, it applies the filter to everything on the image. And we don't want to do that. We just want to apply it in a particular part of the photo. So follow my cursor to the right side. We're going to use these control points. For anyone not familiar, this is how you would apply a filter to part of an image, but maybe remove it from another part of the image. So we can be very selective and very precise without having to worry about making complicated masks. So basically, if you just click the plus button here, and then you just go click on the object where you want the filter applied. It'll actually, when you start with a plus control point, apply the adjustment just in that area, and it removes the low key filter or whatever filter you're using from all of the rest of the image, right? So let's just take a look at that again. I'm going to delete this control point by clicking on it. You can see it's highlighted. So I just tap the delete key on my keyboard to get rid of it. Low key by default is going to be applied to the entire image. We only want it in certain parts of the image, so you click that plus button. We add it into the area where we want it. I'm going to actually take another plus control point and put it behind my aunt and grandfather there. And then I'm going to do the same here. And plus control points are going to put the effect in. Minus control points, if I go and click and take a minus control point, take the effect out, expand that out. What these points are doing is looking for similar tones, colors, and textures, right? And basically, magically removing the effect, right? So this minus control point is figuring out what areas and objects it should be affecting based upon the point or place that I put the control point. So I've placed it on the barn here, and it gets rid of it basically anywhere inside of this circle, right? Now, we're not making a circular selection. We're actually making a selection inside of the circle of the object that you place the point on. And just to hit that home, if you follow me back over to the right side, we click on the words control points. And here we actually click and look at the masks that are being made by these control points, which, by the way, to do that, we've opened up into this control point list just by clicking on the words control points. If I want to see the selection that a particular control point is making, I can click on the little box that's to the right of the label. And what you'll see here is anything that's white is being affected. I should say anything that's white is having this filter applied to it. Anything that's black does not have any of this filter applied, and anything that's gray is going to have some of that filter applied to it. And the beauty of these masks is that you can see how photographic they are. And therefore, even if the filter is applying in an area that maybe we don't want it, like on the side of the barn here, you can see that very quickly, and then you can just remove the effect using your minus control points, right? Really, I only want it in the shadow area here, and basically by placing more control points, we can clean this stuff up. Now, I don't use these selective, I don't use the masks all that much. It's a fantastic tool. It helps you be a lot more precise. You can see exactly where the adjustment is applied and where it's not. This time, by the way, I've turned on all of the control point masks by just clicking on the little box that has the circle in it. That's actually a button. You can toggle where the filter is being applied and where it's not by clicking on that. Really nice feature. I don't find myself using that feature all that much anymore, because what I do is I just look and make sure when I'm toggling my filter on and off that is doing what I want it to do. If the filter is applying somewhere where I don't want it to be, I just add a control point. Or if it's not applying in an area where I want it to be, I add a plus control point. Again, you can be very, very precise with these masks, but you don't really need to be for the most part. You just have to place the point where you want the effect. That's a plus control point, or where you don't with a minus control point. All right, so we've used pro contrast, remove color cast, low key. I've talked your ear off about the interface. Let's just minimize the tools and take a look really quickly at a side-by-side. So on the left side here, you can see the original image. It was cyan and blue, and it had a low contrast range because of the degradation. And we've gone and added quite a lot of contrast and corrected the color, again, using 3 filters very quickly, and then several control points on our last filter specifically. I'm happy with the result. Let's just jump back into the single image view and then click the OK button in the lower right corner of the interface. That brings us back over into Photoshop. And if we had the layers open, you'd actually be able to see the stack of layers here in Photoshop. Probably not that important to see, but I guess I like to show this because we are working in a non-destructive workflow in that we can go back to the original background. For those of you who use smart objects, the entire Nik suite is capable of using smart objects as well. So there's that. We just don't get into that in this kind of webinar. All right, I've just got one more image that I want to show you because we've talked a lot about utilizing silver effects and color effects. They're very, very powerful pieces of software. Another thing that you might get into with both digital images as well as film scans is being able to very quickly dodge and burn. That is, lighten areas that you want people to be looking at and maybe darkening down areas that you don't necessarily need people to be looking at. In this case, the background is blue and the subject here holding a Wheaties box is bright and is probably the right color and tone for the most part. So she separates very nicely off of the background, but I actually want to emphasize that a little bit more. I want to separate her from the background that much more so she pops off of the screen a little bit. So to do that, we're actually going to use Viveza 2. So we'll access the software from our Nik Selective tool. Viveza 2 is a piece of software that we would use to selectively dodge and burn, add contrast, remove contrast, adjust color, and so on. You can use Viveza 2 for global adjustments, which basically means if I adjust brightness or contrast or structure or anything like that right now, it's going to adjust the entire image. Right? If I take my brightness slider to the right, it brightens the whole photo. If I bring it to the left, it darkens the whole photo. I find it handy to have these tools, but typically I'm going to try and make those adjustments in my raw processor if I'm shooting and using digital, or in with other workflows if it's a digital scan. Although Viveza 2 can do quite a lot of stuff for digital scans as well. I'm sorry, for film scans that you're making digital. The key to it, though, is to utilize control points in my mind. The control points here make selections the same way as they did when we looked at them within color effects, but they are adjustment control points, as opposed to the control points within color effects are simply putting the filter in or removing the filter that you're currently using. Here, if I click the Add Control Point button and I go and just click to drop a control point into our background, you'll see the point looks the same, the control point itself. You'll see that the slider that's parallel to the control point looks and works the same way, so we can encompass the entire area that we want to adjust. And then instead of basically just having an opacity slider, which is what the other control points had, we have brightness, contrast, saturation, structure, shadow adjustments, warmth, red, green, blue, and hue. Now, the red, green, blue, and hue sliders become very important sliders when you have a scanned film that there are color issues in. But probably the most important ones, for the most part, especially when working with most digital images, is probably the brightness, contrast, saturation, and structure. Possibly the warmth slider as well, depending upon what you're trying to do. But basically, I want to darken down the background a little bit. I like that it's a little bit blue in nature because of the way that the shadows were working on this particular film. But if I want it to be less blue, I can actually move into the blue slider here and remove blue. Right? And as I do that, you can see it's actually going to turn yellow if I take it too far, because these sliders are working, they are working with / against the opposite colors on the color wheel. So basically blue works with / against yellow. Green is going to allow us to add or subtract green, which is affecting magenta. And then red is going to allow us to add or subtract red, which is going to affect cyan. So in this case, I think that the image was primarily blue, but it's a little bit cyan as well. So if I add red, it's going to neutralize that cyan. I've added a lot. See what happens. I like that we've darkened it off. Notice that it's a little bit less blue. We can actually bring it down and also maybe even just desaturate that. The thing is I could play with these control points, for several minutes at a time. So I don't want to just spend the rest of our time doing that. I do want to add a little bit of blue into that section that was yellow. So what's funky about this kind of film, Chrome is going to degrade probably fastest of the sort of three kinds of film that you're going to see for the most part with still photography, and that's black and white film, which is very typically very good at being able to retain tone, color, texture, and so on. There's no color necessarily, but color negative film is also going to do a pretty good job if stored properly. But chrome film is you're going to see the most problems with the chrome film because of the kinds of dyes that are built into that kind of film, unless you're using Kodachrome, the beautiful Kodachrome, which seems to just last forever, even though the process hasn't. Long story short, ladies and gentlemen, we used some control points to dodge and burn some different areas. Her arm was a little bit too bright, so I placed a control point on her arm and darkened it down. The control point that was on her arm was not affecting the shadow, so I just went and took a control point, placed it directly in the shadow, and took the brightness slider down. And now if we look at the before and after with the preview checkbox, it's pretty subtle, but we go from here, the original, to there. She's kind of coming off of the background a little bit more. We've neutralized some of the tones, and we've kind of cleaned up some of those major problems. I think we could actually push that further, but I'm about due on our timing. So I'm going to click the OK button, and I say we transition into our Q&A.
Okay.
So Lori, how you doing?
Sounds good. Thanks, Dan. Okay, first question is, remind us where to find the Automate menu in Photoshop.
Right. Okay, so let's look at that. I'm going to close out the Nik Selective tool, so just click on the X there. To get to the Automate menu in Photoshop, to open up your Nik Selective tool, you go to the File drop-down menu, you go to Automate, and then the Nik Selective tool should be loaded there if you've installed your Nik software into Photoshop specifically. So that's how you can do that.
Great. And I know some people have noticed that when you minimize, Dan, if you could just minimize that selective tool, it goes to the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah.
See the very bottom left-hand corner. So some people can't find it, and that's another place where you can locate it as well.
Oh, good point. Right. And I rarely use that feature. It is nice because it hides it away, and it will automatically go to the lower left corner, but you can put it wherever you want. You can click on it and drag it around.
That's great. Okay, here's a question for you. I'd like to know if we can have the same vignette fall off that I have in Silver Effects Pro in Color Effects Pro 4. So I guess some of the different vignette options.
Okay.
Between Silver Effects and Color Effects.
Let's go back. I want to see an image that maybe it's more like appropriate. Okay, let's say we want to put a vignette on this image. So I'm going to delete the Silver Effects adjustments that we made there. Our subjects are primarily in the center of the frame. You know, there's stuff happening in the rest of the frame, but the subjects are here. So maybe we want to direct the viewer's attention that way. There are several vignette tools within Color Effects. Let's save one of them as a recipe because I realize I keep forgetting to do that. Oh, by the way, if you tap Tab on your keyboard, you can show or hide the left and right side of your tool sets. And then if you want to show or hide an individual part of your tools panel, the little button that's sort of closest to the particular tool panel, so you can see it's a little arrow with a square. If you click on that, it's going to show or hide the whatever panel you're working with. So just a nice little tip as well when navigating the interface. Okay, so here I've scrolled down to the bottom of our filter list on the left side of the interface, and we have 4 vignette filters technically. 3 of them are vignette specific, and then the 4th one is dark and light and center, which isn't technically a vignette, but it kind of is at the same time. And it's a really beautiful filter. I use that one all the time. But if you want to have a similar or almost exactly the same vignette as what you have within Silver Effects Pro, but on your color image, you might choose to use the vignette lens filter. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And the vignette lens filter is going to try to emulate what would occur with lens vignetting, depending upon your optical system, your lens system, as well as what aperture you're shooting at, so on, paired with whatever camera you're using. So your amount slider, if you slide it to the left, it's going to darken the image. You slide it to the right, you're going to get like a bleeding, a brightening of the tones. I'm going to slide it all the way to the left for now because it's easiest to show you what these different sliders are doing. I'm going to go ahead and increase the size. So the size is how far into the middle the effect is encroaching. And then you have a circle to rectangle shape. So you can adjust that as well. What is kind of fun is it has an overall brightness slider. So if you needed to brighten or darken the entire image, I guess you could do that as well. And then, of course, the other feature is the place center button. So you can click the place center button and I could actually move the center of the vignette wherever we needed it to be, which is a handy feature to have as well. I feel like this filter does not have the hardness slider, which is, and I believe it's called hardness in Silver Effects. I can't recall exactly, but it's basically how hard the edge of the vignette is. So this doesn't have that, and it's one thing to kind of note. So that's your lens vignette filter. Very quickly, I'll just walk you through lens blur, which allows you to blur the edges, and then you've got a bunch of different options as to how you're going to blur and the shape of the blur and the transition and so on. So that's the blurring filter. Blurring vignette filter. And then you have a straight vignette filter. And this is also trying to emulate what a lens vignette would do, except this is the original color effects version of that. And so it's sort of a holdover, and it's there because folks like to use this filter, and it has one capability that none of the other vignettes filters in color effects have, and that is you can actually choose or change your vignette color. So if we wanted the vignette for some reason to be the same color as the details on Gabe's shirt here, you could click on the eyedropper, click on that color, and then there's some funky stuff here. So I'm going to increase the opacity so you can see what it's doing. You can do some really interesting creative stuff, and then I'll adapt the edge. And it's more of a creative filter when used this way than, let's say, a corrective filter or like your regular tonal adjustment. So now we've separated them with this really funky orange. I'm just going to remove the effect using a control point from his forehead. And now we've created a completely different thing. Probably not what we would use for this image, but definitely interesting. There we go. I actually like what it's doing in that case. Okay, so the fourth filter, so before we move on, here I'm getting excited because I can envision different applications of this now. The darken, lighten, center filter. This is totally different than what's within Silver Effects Pro, and I find myself using this darken, lighten, center with other vignette filters. What this tool does is it brightens the middle of the image by default, and it darkens the outside of the image by default. Kind of like how a vignette would work, except you don't see the edge. It's not perceivable really, and the beauty of that is it's kind of like this sleight of eye trick, right? So now I'm going to just darken the center back down, and if we look at the before and after using the checkbox with darken, lighten, center, you can see the original and the enhanced, and it kind of just looks like we relit the photo as opposed to adding a vignette around the edge. So different application, but really powerful. And again, I find myself using this tool with other vignette capabilities. All right, hopefully that answers that.
That's great, Dan. Okay, a couple people were asking, how do you control the size of the control point?
Yep, very valid. I don't think I even mentioned that. So we've applied our darken, lighten, center filter. Let's go ahead and just open this image into Silver Effects. The way that you control these control points are the same, whether you're in Silver Effects Pro or Define or within Sharpener Pro or Color Effects or any of the suite. The difference that you'll find is the capability of the control points application, meaning in Silver Effects Pro, the control points are adjusting the different sort of standard black and white tools, lightening, darkening, contrast adjustments, and so on. In Sharpener Pro, you would place and sort of conceptualize where you would put control points the same way. You'd click on the control point and then you'd place it on the object you want to adjust, let's say like Gabe's beard. So we'll place it on the beard. And then in Silver Effects, we can adjust the tool itself. Let's add some structure and darken his beard down just a touch, add some contrast in that area. If we wanted that adjustment to apply to a larger area, to stuff that looks similar to the control point, like his beard. I can expand that out, and now you're going to see the adjustment that we made being applied into his hair as well. And to expand it, you click on the slider that's parallel to the control point, and you can just pull it out to expand into a wider area, or pull it towards the control point, and this is going to make a smaller adjustment. Now, there are a lot of tricks to using these control points. Like if I wanted to adjust his beard and his hair, I probably wouldn't encompass all of his head, because that goes and starts to adjust her hair as well as his shirt back here. What I would rather do, probably, at least in this situation, is size the control point to really just adjust his beard, and then duplicate this small point and put it in his hair. And to do that, you just hold down Option if you're on a Mac, or Command if you're on a PC. Yep. So press and hold Option on a Mac. While you're holding it, you click on the control point that you want to duplicate, and then you just drag away your duplicate control point. There's actually 3 ways of duplicating control points. That's just one of them. But that's how you would control the size and where the effect is applied with the control point. And then, of course, you'd use the specific sliders to the software that you're using to make your adjustment.
Perfect,
Hopefully,
Ian.
yeah, absolutely.
That's great. While you're there, somebody's asking about selective colorization. Can you show that last slider, how you can pull out the color?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's place a control point on the flower area of his shirt, right? That really funky color. We're going to size the area of influence to be relatively small for now, and we're going to go to this last slider, which is selective colorization, and we're just going to go ahead and turn it up to 11. We'll just bring it all the way up to 100%. What that's doing is it's reintroducing the color in the area that's the control point is on, that it thinks it should be adjusting, right? So if I encompass his entire shirt, you can see it's starting to reintroduce the color that was originally in the image back into his shirt. If you click on the control point and move it around, you can see how it changes based upon the color and tone that you put it on. His shirt's actually a pretty good one to show, because it's a very different color and tone than most of the other image. You can see some of the background is actually being adjusted, and a little bit of his skin. Let's say we don't want his skin to be affected. We just take another control point and we just place it right here on his face. And as you add control points, each control point kind of gets smarter, because each control point is going to make a selection of the area and object that you've placed the point on. And as you do that, all of the control points communicate with each other, and they kind of recognize what they should and shouldn't be adjusting based upon where you've placed these other control points. And then we could go on and on about how to place these control points as well.
Okay, here's a question about one of your older Chrome images. It says, on the old Chrome image, do you clean up the image in Photoshop first and then correct the color in Nik?
Got it.
And also, just to mention that this does work in DxO Photolab as well as Lightroom. We're just showing you Photoshop today.
Precisely. The whole demonstration is coming from Photoshop today, because I wanted to focus on the Nik Selective tools specifically, and that's within Photoshop. You access the plugins a different way within Photolab or Lightroom, but all of the things that we've seen today are you can do within any of the versions. Everything sans the Nik Selective tool capabilities. You can only do that in Photoshop. So was it this one? Let's talk about this one. Lori, can you rephrase the question? The question was, would we clean it up beforehand or after?
Yes.
So it depends. We've opened up a whole can of worms into another kind of image processing. So for my own, if I were to make really harsh or strong adjustments like what we've done here to the color and tone, I think I would make the adjustment to the color and tone first and then clean this stuff up. And that's because if I go in and I zoom in here, I'm at 100%. And if I'm on the original image and I go and clone this scratch and all that dust out, and I don't do a really good job, and then I add contrast, the not so great job I've done cloning is going to be more noticeable. So on images where I know I'm going to be making dramatic adjustments like this one to correct it, probably clean up those scratches in the dust afterwards. If I didn't have to do so much work, I probably would just clean up those dusts and scratches. And honestly, the best way to clean up the dust and scratches is to do it before you scan it. And then you don't have to do it digitally. You can clean the negative or the chrome beforehand. Obviously, like this is the thing's just destroyed, which I thought was a good example to show. And it's not totally destroyed, but there's some major problems. Anyways, I think I answered that one.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dan.
Thanks, Larry.
Bye, everyone.